Deanna. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for watching this video. Today we're going to be talking about the real resources of startup studios. I think studio operators who are interested in kind of how do you position your studio when you're talking to entrepreneurs? And then as on the contrary of that, when you're an entrepreneur, how do you evaluate a studio? How do you think about the types of resources they provide and whether or not you need that value? So that's what we're going to get into today. I have this kind of obligatory subscribe to this channel. I think this is great content. If you're gonna, be learning about startup studios, you might as well subscribe because we're gonna be putting out a ton of videos in the future. I don't want you to miss out. And let's move on. As you can see, I'm great at sales. What we're going to cover today, we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of overview of the studio value add for founders, and then we'll dive deep into speed, support, and networks, which I think are the three key resources that startup studios bring to the table. All right, let's talk about making a startup. And don't ask me why I always equate building a startup to cooking a meal. I think that the analogy, the metaphor works for me in my brain. So when you're cooking a meal or cooking a startup, you need an appetite, which is, a problem to solve, passion for solving that problem. You need to have an idea of what you're trying to make. Okay. So you could just do you want Italian? Are you, Mediterranean? What are you trying to make here? What are the ingredients involved? And so with startups, that's typically like tech and ops team, marketing, sales, business development, legal, finance. You need certain ingredients to be able to, kind of build and scale a startup. And then you're always going to be missing some things. And when you're cooking, I don't have that. And I wonder if I can substitute this for that, or, I'll put something else in there. And so it's like, you kind of have to have this ingenuity as, you're cooking a meal, but it's the same thing when you're building a startup. You got to be problem solving. You can't let anything kind of deter you. You just got to substitute, eliminate, keep going. So I think these, kind of main ingredients, and what you'll see here on the right is this picture of a bunch of random ingredients. And it kind of is like, as a solo founder, this is what you have. You have a bunch of random things and you're like, how do I turn this into a world-class meal? And that's what startup studios help you do. Startup studios package the ingredients, they provide the recipes, they speed up the whole process, and oftentimes it results in a better looking and tasting meal. And we're going to get into kind of how they do that, but I think that's an important component just right off the bat is, think about it as cooking on your own versus having a meal kit delivered to you with, HelloFresh or any of the other kind of meal kits. They perfectly portion out and package the ingredients, and they give you this kind of recipe card that's got a beautiful picture of what it's supposed to look like on the front. And they don't do the cooking for you, obviously, but they make it a lot easier. And that's what that's the analogy I want to use with startup studios. They're not doing the work for you, but they're going to make it a lot easier. And honestly, it's probably going to be a more enjoyable experience, especially if you're a solo founder. And this kind of just equates to that. So if building a startup solo is the equivalent of opening the fridge and making something edible from the random food you have on hand, building a startup with a studio is like getting a personalized meal kit. And I have HelloFresh down here. It's actually a company that came out of a startup studio in Germany called Rocket Internet. Fun fact of the day. Let's talk about the recipe for success with startups and startup studios. So on the left here, you have a bunch of kind of commoditized services. You have strategy, and so that maybe sounds a little abstract, but you can hire a consulting firm to give you a strategy of how to approach or disrupt a market. So that's kind of a commoditized service. UX, design, tech, and then legal, finance stuff. They do provide all of these, and I don't want to discount that. But on the right is what I think are the true kind of the pillars of the value out of the startup studio model. These are speed, support, and networks. This kind of trifecta of something that you could not buy as a founder. Even if you had $1 billion, you can't really buy these three things. And that's what I think startup studios do so well. This is just kind of an overview for anyone who's new to the startup studio world, and just kind of this is how when someone asks me, what does a startup studio do? What does a venture studio do? This is what I answer with. Studios help founders build successful startups with speed by leveraging shared resources and repeatable processes. And I say it like that, like a little bit of a, robotically, because I want you to really pick up on each of the pieces, right? So studios help founders, that's one. They build successful startups, that's two, and you're going to learn a little bit about that in the next section. With speed, that's the competitive advantage, that's the value. By leveraging shared resources, that is the how. And implementing repeatable processes. And that's the kind of outcome, this economies of scale that studios are able to get by leveraging, repeated processes and shared resources. So just a quick kind of overview there. So let's talk about speed, the very first one. Studios do a bunch of things that helps to speed up the startup process, building a startup, launching, scaling a startup. But these are the four that I kind of picked out to talk about today. I think the innovation playbooks are one of the most helpful, and maybe it's just because I come from an ops background, and I just think that playbooks are the quintessential. If you had a roadmap, I could get there. I'll probably get lost. Can I just turn on the GPS? Like that would help me. And so innovation playbooks for a variety of things. Finding a problem worth solving. Validating an idea with data. How do you, construct your hypotheses and run data-driven tests? Building an MVP. How do you do that quickly? How do you get traction? Run, pilot programs. How do you launch successfully? How do you fundraise with speed so that it doesn't take 18 months? Those are all those playbooks are typically studios will provide. Industry expertise, I think, with studios, they're typically focused in one domain. So like a fintech studio, a health tech studio. One of my favorites that I kind of came upon recently, a pet tech studio, building, rovers of the world. And so they have this deep industry expertise in one specific domain. So as a founder, you don't need to go read every research report. You don't need to know everything. Like they will supplement your knowledge gaps, and that gets you up to speed faster. The validation experience, like they have been through this probably, if they're, any kind of been around for a while, they've probably been through this hundreds of times. They know what works and what doesn't when it comes to validating ventures, which is really in the early stages, that's what you're doing. Like don't, build something people want. So, you have to validate that. And how do you do that? That's a big roadblock for founders, and it typically takes them the most amount of time in the early stages. So studios speed that up. And then rapid testing. And this is like studios will push you to launch before you're ready, get out of the building and talk to customers. And you have this accountability from someone saying like, how many customers did you talk to last week? How many users did you recruit? Like if you're building your, advisory team, like how many advisor meetings did you have last week? And it's not just you, sitting there alone and asking yourself these questions like, I could push that off a little bit. Like I don't need to talk to those people this week. Now you have somebody or a team of somebody's from the studio asking you these questions you're going to have to answer. It makes you go faster. It makes you execute instead of just sit there and plan and think about things. So studios help with speed. And this I wanted to just kind of produce on the data side. Startups that come out of studios typically launch 3 times faster than they do on their own. And so this purple line, this is data from the GSSN white paper 2020. The purple line is kind of launching with a startup studio. So from company to creation to seed, to raising your seed round of fundraising is roughly 12 months, where that is 36 months when you're doing it on your own as kind of a solo founder or first-time founder. So that's like a third of the time. And then from seed to Series A, 12 to 24 months versus 36 to 54 months. So you can just see that, according to the data, startups coming out of studios do actually launch faster. And that's not even getting into, do they launch faster and more successfully? Because they do, but it's just talking about speed here. They launch and get to seed and Series A faster than traditional startup creation. Let's talk about support. So this is one where a personal, of mine, my mission is to democratize entrepreneurship. And I think the reason that we struggle with this so much as an innovation ecosystem is because we're not giving the right support to founders. And so there's a lot of attention and support for founders who have repeatable successes and have launched and exited multiple ventures. I mean, they can get support from anyone. It's harder for the people who are starting out. It's harder for the underrepresented backgrounds that don't have, support. It's harder for people living outside of major cities. Studios are that support. And I always think of this as like, if you're a solo entrepreneur, kind of building a company, it's like you are like a person climbing a mountain, and you can do it alone. It's not like you can't, but it's so much better if you have someone kind of like watching your back and helping you out and like, oh, you should grab that ledge over there. Like, they can see things that you can't see. And it's just always so good to like have someone in your corner, which is kind of the first piece of this. Around mindset and strategy is a piece of the support from studios. Don't underestimate the power of having some people in your corner that believe in you. They will build you up. They will give you feedback on your pitch, and they will, tell you that you did a great job, but here are the things you could fix. And it's not just you alone anymore. Now you have a team behind you who really wants to see you succeed. They have equity in your venture. Like they need you to succeed. And I love that. And then they do help with actually just the workload itself. So they'll test your product, they'll test your MVP, they'll test your landing page, they'll click buttons, they'll try to break stuff, just to help you work through the bugs and challenges faster. They typically help with recruiting, and they'll give you feedback on your pitch and your idea and your solution and your strategy, which is invaluable as a solo founder building alone, and you're just kind of asking yourself these questions and they're just floating off into the air, and you're like, I think that's what I should do, I don't know. And studios will give you that feedback and be like, yeah, well, I would try it this way, or yeah, that's what you should do, that sounds great. And then all the other stuff that I talked about earlier, these kind of commoditized services, tech, design, marketing, back office, stuff like that. Also in support, I put capital, because most studios do provide a level of funding to the startups, and they'll continue to provide funding as traction increases. And let's talk about the last one, network. Talent. They'll help you build a team, right? So they know other innovators in your space. They are interested in helping you grow your team and getting the best, talent for your team. And so like, that's one of the things that studios do best, is helping you to build out your early team. Well, they first sit in those spots, but then they'll help you recruit people to kind of replace themselves. And then, you'll have a COO, and like whoever from the studio is helping you with operations will take a step back and now implement that person. And so they'll help you with recruiting and help you with setting up those processes. They can help you build your advisor board, which is, hard to do as a solo founder. Like, you don't know these people. And if you want like big names on your board, you need to start making those connections. Studios can help you do that faster. And then they'll help you get beta testers and customers. This is one where I think if your studios you're thinking about working with is operating in a specific domain, like fintech or health tech, it's hard for you to go out into the ecosystem and just try to promote your new thing and get customers to beta test it. But, if the studio's been working in that field for a year, 2 years, 3 years, they have lists of customers who they've sold to before, or who have signed up to beta test with the studio, or like other things, so they can help you get those first customers. And then obviously there's investors. So studios will help make introductions to investors when you're ready. And they also help you design your fundraise strategy, which I think is really important, because as if you're a first-time founder, it's critical. If you're a repeat founder, it's still important to have a fundraise strategy, and just kind of, it's not necessarily the case that the people who invest in your last company will invest in this one. And so how do you target the right investors, and what's your approach, and, obviously feedback on your pitch and all of that stuff. So, and the investor piece of it, as far as network goes, seems to be really important to entrepreneurs when evaluating studios. So that's that, speed, support, and networks. And for the studio operators kind of watching this, or emerging studio operators watching this, I think these three things could be your competitive advantage as a studio. There are more studios launching every single day. you're going to need to start to have a differentiation, other than just, we're the only startup studio in, I don't know, Seattle. Now there's 5 startup studios in Seattle. So you're going to have to do better than that. If you over-index and double down on providing, fast speed, quickness, support, like unparalleled, we're here for you, we're going to bring you, get you anything you need support, and then network, like really build up your ecosystem of beta testers and customers and A players that are, in variety of fields, and also obviously investors, then an entrepreneur is going to have a much easier time picking your studio. Like, it's going to be a no-brainer. So my advice to you is distill your playbooks down into a clear recipe, source and package the ingredients necessary for success, and do it over and over and over again, and optimize. So that's kind of it. That's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Leave a comment or follow me on Twitter. All of that. Thanks.